My name is Caleb Thorne and I live in a small town called Ridgeview, Ohio. At 35 years old, you could say I'm in the prime of my life, but life has a funny way of redefining what prime really means. From the outside, I probably look like any other guy in town. I keep myself in decent shape, I've got a steady job doing custom woodwork, and I own a solid, dependable pickup truck that's more practical than pretty. But on the inside, there's a story my body tells every single day, a story written in the cartilage of my knees. I'm a veteran, served in the Army for 8 years as a mechanic. I didn't see a lot of direct combat, but I spent thousands of hours crouched in and under heavy vehicles on hard-packed sand and unforgiving concrete. The constant strain, the awkward angles, the sheer weight of it all wore my knees down to the point where the Department of Veterans Affairs rated me 60% disabled. Some days are good, just a dull, forgettable ache. Other days, especially when a storm is rolling in over the Ohio fields, it feels like there are tiny shards of glass grinding in the joints with every step I take. My doctor insisted I take a handicap placard for my truck. At first I refused. I felt like a fraud. I can walk, I can carry things, I'm not in a wheelchair. I'd see folks much older or in far worse shape and think they need it more than me. But my doctor, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Evans, put it to me plainly. She said, "Caleb, it's not about what you can do on a good day. It's about making sure you can still do it on a bad day. It's a tool, not a trophy. Use it when you need it." So I took the placard, but I made a promise to myself. I would only use it when I was having a really bad day, or in a situation where a long walk across a giant parking lot would genuinely make the rest of my day miserable. I don't use it at the grocery store, I don't use it at the hardware store, and I certainly don't use it for a quick stop at a gas station. To me, it felt like a matter of honor, of respecting the system that was designed to help those who truly struggle. My little town of Ridgeview is the kind of place where everyone knows your name, or at least your truck. It's a place built on a certain kind of unspoken social contract. You wave at people you pass on the road, you hold the door for the person behind you, and you don't act like you're more important than anyone else. That sense of community, of simple, everyday respect, is one of the reasons I moved back here after my time in the service. It felt like coming home to a place where things still made sense. This particular Friday started out as a good day. The sun was out, the air was warm, and my knees were giving me a rare break, humming along with a low, manageable ache. My best friend Mark was having his annual start of summer barbecue, and I was on my way over. My only task was to pick up a specific craft beer from a brewery a town over that Mark was obsessed with. The gas station on the edge of Ridgeview was the only place that carried it. I pulled my dark gray truck into the station's parking lot, feeling good. I was looking forward to an evening of good food, bad jokes, and the easy comfort of old friends. The parking lot was moderately busy with cars shuffling in and out. There were two handicap spots right by the front door. One was empty, the other spot, the one on the driver's side, had a problem. A huge gleaming white pickup truck, the kind that had probably never seen a speck of mud in its life, was parked so far over the line that its driver's side was a good 2 feet into the handicap space. The truck was practically straddling the blue line painted on the asphalt. I slowed down, frowning. It was one of those little acts of selfishness that just grinds my gears. It's a simple thing, parking between the lines. It's not a hard concept. But this person had decided that their convenience, their need to have extra space so no one could possibly ding their precious truck, was more important than the needs of someone who might genuinely require that specially designated spot. I saw the driver get out. He was a man maybe a few years older than me, dressed in expensive-looking golf clothes, talking loudly on his phone, completely oblivious to the world around him. He didn't even glance at his terrible parking job. He just strolled into the store as if he owned the place. For a moment, I was just going to find another spot. It wasn't a bad knee day after all. I didn't need the handicap spot. But then I looked at that gleaming white truck, at the sheer arrogance of it, and something inside me snapped. It wasn't about my knees anymore. It was about the principle. It was about that unspoken social contract of Ridgeview being broken by this guy who acted like the rules didn't apply to him. My truck has wide running boards that stick out a few inches from the doors. They're great for getting in and out, but they also serve as a perfect buffer, preventing other people's doors from hitting mine. An idea, a beautiful, petty, and perfectly legal idea, bloomed in my mind. I looked at the bright blue and white handicap placard hanging from my rearview mirror. Today, I decided, was a day I truly needed it. I swung my truck around and aimed for the empty handicap spot. I'm a careful and precise driver, a skill honed from years of maneuvering military vehicles in tight spaces. I pulled into the spot slowly, my eyes fixed on the sliver of space between my running board and the side of his truck. I got closer and closer until my running board was maybe an inch from his driver's side door, not touching, not a scratch, but perfectly immovably in the way. There was absolutely no way he could open his door to get back in. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive parking. I put my truck in park, a slow smile spreading across my face. I grabbed my wallet and got out, making sure my handicap placard was clearly visible. I felt a little jolt of adrenaline. This was it. The problem wasn't just a bad parking job anymore. The problem was entitlement, and my nemesis was the guy in the golf shirt who was about to get a small but potent lesson in considering others. I walked into the convenience store with a newfound spring in my step, the ache in my knees completely forgotten. The store was bright and clean, with the familiar smell of coffee and sugary snacks. I spotted the guy, my nemesis, over by the counter. He was still on his phone, speaking in that loud, important voice people use when they want everyone to know they're doing business. He was complaining to someone about a tea time, completely unaware of the beautiful little trap I had just set for him. The gas station was designed with large windows facing the parking lot, a feature I was suddenly very grateful for. I made my way to the beer cooler at the back, but my path conveniently took me right past that front window. I could see our two trucks nestled together like old friends. My gray functional workhorse and his shiny white status symbol locked in a silent standoff. I found the craft beer Mark wanted, a six-pack of some fancy India Pale Ale with a wolf on the label. My original plan was to be in and out in 2 minutes, but now the game had changed. This was no longer a simple errand, it was a performance. And for this performance to have its full effect, it needed an audience of one, and he needed time to simmer. I decided to take a little tour of the store. I browsed the chip aisle, pretending to weigh the critical decision between sour cream and onion or salt and vinegar. I meandered over to the fountain drink station, contemplating the vast array of choices. I was in no hurry. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the man in the golf shirt end his call and turn to leave. This was it, the moment of truth. I casually moved closer to the front window, grabbing a bag of beef jerky as a prop. He pushed open the glass door and walked out into the sunlight. He took a few steps toward his truck, then stopped dead. I could see him from behind, his shoulders stiffened. He took a step to the side, then another, as if trying to find a different angle that would make the situation look better. It did not. He leaned forward, peering at the tiny gap between our vehicles. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head as he processed the fact that his driver's side door was completely, utterly blocked. He stood there for a full minute just staring. Then he put his hands on his hips, a classic pose of suburban dad frustration. He looked around, probably for the owner of the gray truck. His eyes scanned the parking lot, then swept over the front of the store. I ducked my head a little, pretending to be intensely interested in the nutritional information on my jerky. I watched as he walked to the front of my truck and looked in the windshield. He would have seen the handicap placard hanging there, clear as day. I saw him throw his hands up in the air in a gesture of pure exasperation. Then, to my immense satisfaction, he walked over to one of the little metal tables near the entrance, pulled out a chair with a screech, and sat down with a heavy sigh. He crossed his arms and glared at my truck. He was going to wait me out. A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me. It was working better than I could have ever imagined. He was being forced to sit there, stewing in his own selfish choices. Every second he sat there was a second he had to think about what he'd done. But my little victory lap was about to hit a speed bump. I had underestimated his arrogance. After about a minute of sitting, he apparently decided that waiting was for lesser mortals. He stood up, marched back to the store, and pushed the door open with enough force to make it bang against the frame. He strode right up to the counter where a woman named Brenda, who had worked there for as long as I could remember, was ringing up a customer. "Excuse me," he said, his voice dripping with impatience. "Whose gray truck is that outside?" Brenda, a calm, pleasant woman in her 60s, just gave him a polite smile. "I'm not sure, sir. A lot of gray trucks in Ridgeview." "Well, they've parked so close to me I can't get in my vehicle," he said, his voice getting louder. "And they're in a handicap spot. I want you to make an announcement. Have them move it." Now, my heart started beating a little faster. This was an escalation I hadn't planned on. I stayed by the window, trying to look casual. Brenda handled it like a pro. "Sir, I can't make an announcement like that. It's a public parking lot, and as you can see, they have a handicap placard. They are legally parked." The man's face started to get red. "A placard? I looked in. He doesn't look handicapped. There's nothing wrong with him." That line hit me like a punch to the gut. My good mood evaporated, replaced by a hot flash of anger. He doesn't look handicapped. How many times had I heard some version of that? How many times had I felt the judgment of strangers because my disability wasn't visible? The fight was no longer about a parking spot. It was personal. It was about every veteran with unseen scars, every person with a chronic illness who looks fine on the outside. This guy in his neat golf shirt and his spotless truck had just made himself the spokesman for every ignorant person who thinks they have a right to judge someone else's pain. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. This was getting worse. He was creating a scene. People were starting to stare. My simple, petty revenge was turning into a public confrontation. A part of me, the part that just wanted to get to Mark's barbecue and forget the world, screamed at me to just go out there, move the truck, and let it go. But the other part of me, the part that spent 8 years learning not to back down, dug its heels in. I had made my stand, and now I had to see it through. This was my low point. I felt exposed, judged, and angry. My perfect little plan had gone sour, and now I was trapped in a standoff with a loud, entitled man who was challenging the very legitimacy of my pain in front of a store full of my neighbors. All the joy was gone, replaced by a grim determination. I was no longer enjoying this. I just needed to win. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. My initial plan of a quick, anonymous lesson had failed. Situation had escalated into a public spectacle, and my nemesis had made it deeply personal. For a moment, I honestly considered just caving. I could pay for my beer, walk out, get in my truck, and leave. He would get what he wanted, and I could escape the confrontation. But then I pictured his smug face as I pulled away, the triumphant look that would say, "I won, my entitlement is justified." I thought about Dr. Evans telling me the placard was a tool to be used when I needed it. And right then I needed it, not just for my knees but for my self-respect. I decided to double down. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to finish my shopping, and I was going to take my sweet time doing it. I straightened my shoulders and walked away from the window, leaving my half-examined bag of jerky on the shelf. I walked back to the counter, right past the fuming man in the golf shirt. I placed the six-pack of beer on the counter. Brenda looked at me, her eyes showing a hint of concern. Just this, Caleb, she asked, her voice calm and steady. Actually, Brenda, I said, making sure my voice was loud enough for Mr. Golf's shirt to hear. I think I need a coffee for the road, and you know what? I'm feeling lucky today. Give me one of those scratch-off lottery tickets, the $5 ones. The man let out an audible huff of disbelief. I could feel his glare on the back of my neck. Brenda, bless her heart, played along beautifully. She turned to the coffee machine and began to slowly, methodically prepare a fresh pot. It'll just be a minute, Caleb, she said. Gotta make a fresh batch for you. No problem at all, I replied cheerfully. I'm in no rush. The next 5 minutes were some of the most tense and satisfying moments of my life. I stood at the counter, chatting with Brenda about her grandkids, the weather, and the upcoming town festival. I paid for my items, carefully counting out my change. I then took my lottery ticket and a borrowed penny and began to meticulously scratch off the silver coating, square by square, as if I were defusing a bomb. All the while, the man stood there, fuming silently, his arms crossed, tapping his foot. He was trapped. He couldn't leave, and he couldn't force me to leave. He had lost control of the situation, and he absolutely hated it. Finally, with my coffee in hand and my non-winning lottery ticket crumpled in my pocket, I decided it was time. Well, Brenda, you have a good one, I said. You too, Caleb, drive safe. I turned and walked towards the door, giving a polite nod to the man as I passed. He just glared at me with pure hatred. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the afternoon sun. I didn't go straight to my truck. I took a slow sip of my hot coffee, savoring the moment. He came out right behind me, his face a mask of rage. We walked toward our trucks together, the final showdown. He got to his truck first and yanked on the handle of his driver's side door. It didn't budge, of course. It just made a dull thud against my running board. Are you happy with yourself? He snarled, turning to face me. You think this is funny? I think it's a consequence, I said calmly, taking another sip of coffee. You parked in a handicapped space. I used the handicapped space next to it. Seems pretty straightforward to me. I was barely over the line, he shouted. And you don't even need that spot. You walk just fine. This was it, the climax. I set my coffee on the hood of my truck. I looked him straight in the eye. You have no idea what I need, I said, my voice low and steady. You see me walk from the door to my truck and you think you know my life story. You see this placard and you think I'm faking it because I don't fit your little picture of what a disabled person should look like. I took a step closer and for the first time he looked a little uncertain. Let me tell you something, I continued. This placard was given to me by the Department of Veterans Affairs because I spent 8 years of my life serving this country, and that service wore down my body in ways you can't see. Some days the pain in my knees is so bad that walking across a parking lot like this one feels like walking on broken glass. Today isn't one of those days, luckily for me, but you don't know that. You don't know anything about me. All you knew when you parked your truck was that you didn't want to risk getting a scratch on your paint job, and you didn't care if that meant taking up a space that a person in real pain might desperately need. A small crowd had started to gather. A family filling up their minivan was watching. An older gentleman who had been sitting at another table was listening intently. The man in the golf shirt looked around, suddenly aware that he was the villain in this public play. His anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a sullen embarrassment. He was beaten, he knew it. The public opinion had turned against him. So you have a choice, I said, picking my coffee back up. You can stand here and argue with a disabled veteran all day, or you can figure out how to get into your truck and go about your business. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then without another word, he turned, walked around the front of his massive truck, and opened the passenger side door. In a final, glorious act of humiliation, he had to perform the crawl of shame. He awkwardly clambered over the center console, his expensive clothes bunching up until he finally settled into the driver's seat. He slammed the passenger door shut, started the engine with a roar, and peeled out of the parking lot without a backward glance. I stood there for a second, a wave of relief and triumph washing over me. The old man at the other table gave me a thumbs up and a wide grin. I nodded back at him. I had done it. I had faced him down and won. I got into my truck, the smell of fresh coffee filling the cab. The pain in my knee was a dull throb, a familiar companion, but my spirit was soaring. It was never just about the parking spot. It was about respect. It was about standing up to the casual, thoughtless selfishness that can make the world a harder place for people who are already fighting silent battles. As I pulled out onto the road, heading towards Mark's house with my beer and my coffee, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had turned a bad situation into a victory, not with anger, but with patience and principle. I arrived at the barbecue and told the story to Mark and my friends, who roared with laughter and clapped me on the back. For one night, I was a small-town hero. The resolution felt complete, but the story has a small, quiet epilogue. A few weeks later, I was driving through the next town over, and I saw that same gleaming white truck parked in front of a fancy restaurant. This time it was parked perfectly beautifully right in the center of the lines, with plenty of space on either side. Maybe, just maybe, the lesson stuck, and that more than anything felt like the real victory.